The champagne cork popped just as I opened my apartment door, and for one stupid second, I thought they were throwing me a surprise party. Then I saw my cousin Tiffany wearing my diamond earrings, the ones my dead mother gave me on her deathbed, the ones that never left my locked jewelry box. She saw me staring and touched them deliberately, smiling. "Oh, these Brandon said you wanted me to have them. You know, since you're always so busy with work and never wear them anyway." Her voice was sugar-sweet, practiced. The same voice she'd used for years to borrow money she never repaid to cry about her problems while ignoring mine to play the victim while stealing everything I had. Brandon was there too, my ex-boyfriend of 8 months, holding up his phone to record my reaction with the focus of a documentarian. Behind him, 15 strangers were drinking my wine, eating catered food on my dishes, celebrating in my home like they owned it. Because according to the lease agreement his mother Eleanor thrust into my shaking hands, they did. "Your signature's right there, sweetheart," Eleanor said, her manicured finger tapping the forged document. She was wearing my silk bathrobe, my mother's bathrobe, the one that still smelled like her perfume, the one I hadn't been able to wash because it was all I had left. "You signed over your lease rights 3 weeks ago, don't you remember?" She turned to the crowd, her voice rising with false concern. "She's been having these episodes. Memory loss paranoia. We've been so worried." Tiffany rushed forward, grabbing my hands with manufactured tears in her eyes. "Aria, please don't be upset. We're family. We're doing this for you. You've been working yourself to death, forgetting things, acting erratic. We love you too much to watch you destroy yourself." She squeezed my hands tighter, and I felt her remove my grandmother's ring from my finger in one smooth, practiced motion. Gone, just like that. The camera kept recording. Everyone kept watching, nodding sympathetically at poor, unstable Aria. And I realized with perfect cold clarity that this wasn't random. This was a performance. They'd been planning this for months. Every time Tiffany had cried to me about her rent, she was stealing my mail. Every time Brandon said he was helping me relax, he was photographing my documents. Every time Eleanor visited, she was mapping my routines. They'd stolen my identity piece by piece, built a case that I was mentally unstable, orchestrated my complete destruction. All of it captured on video as evidence of my breakdown. My hands were shaking. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. I wanted to scream that Tiffany was a parasite who'd been leeching off me for years. I wanted to grab those earrings off her lying face. I wanted to show everyone the credit card statements proving she'd stolen $47,000 from me. But that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted me to lose control, to prove I was unstable, to give them ammunition. So instead I smiled. I looked directly into Brandon's camera and said 5 words, "I'll see you in court." Then I walked out. Because they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They thought I was just another nice girl they could manipulate and discard. What they didn't know was that I'm a risk analyst who specializes in finding vulnerabilities and destroying them. And in their arrogance, in their certainty that I was too weak to fight back, they'd just shown me every single weakness they had. 3 months later, they're all in prison. My cousin Tiffany is working 2 jobs to pay back every penny she stole. Brandon's mother lost everything, and I'm standing in my apartment wearing my mother's earrings, finally free. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But before I tell you how I made them all pay, before I reveal how spectacularly their scheme backfired, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever had to fight back against people who underestimated you, hit that like button right now. Subscribe because this story is going to show you exactly how to turn the tables on toxic people. And drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation because trust me, what I did was just getting started. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 6 months before that nightmarish evening, I was riding high on what I thought was the peak of my career. At 28 years old, I had just closed the biggest deal of my life for Aegis Global, a prestigious risk management firm in downtown Boston. The Harrington account, they called it. $50 million in contracts, all because of my analysis, my strategy, my endless nights of research and presentation, perfection. I remember walking into the office that Monday morning past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, the winter sun making the water sparkle like diamonds. I felt invincible. My boss, Victoria Sterling, had called me into her corner office that morning. Victoria was everything I aspired to be, or so I thought. She was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her dark hair always pulled back in a severe bun that somehow made her look both powerful and elegant. She had climbed the corporate ladder in a male-dominated industry, and I admired that. I wanted to be her. "Aria," she said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her massive mahogany desk. "The Harrington deal was extraordinary. Truly, the board is very impressed with your work." I felt my chest swell with pride. This was it, the recognition I had been working toward for 3 years. However, Victoria continued, her perfectly manicured fingers steepling together, "I need to talk to you about your work-life balance. You're burning the candle at both ends, and while your results are impressive, I'm concerned about sustainability." I remember feeling confused. Wasn't dedication supposed to be a good thing? "I appreciate your concern, Victoria, but I'm fine. I love what I do." "Of course you do." She smiled, but something about it didn't reach her eyes. "But you need to learn to delegate to trust your team. Take some time off. Enjoy your success. You've earned it." Looking back now, I realize that was the first red flag. Victoria wasn't concerned about my well-being. She was already plotting how to sideline me, how to take credit for my work while making sure I wasn't around to defend my territory. But I was too naive, too trusting to see it then. That evening, I came home to my penthouse apartment, a beautiful 2-bedroom space on the 20th floor of a luxury building in Back Bay. I had worked so hard to afford this place. It represented everything I had achieved on my own, without family support, without a trust fund like so many of my colleagues had. Just pure determination and long hours. Brandon was waiting for me sprawled on my couch playing video games. We had been dating for about 8 months at that point. He was charming, funny, and attentive in the beginning, everything you could want in a boyfriend. He was a freelance graphic designer, or at least that's what he called himself. In reality, he seemed to spend most of his time between projects, which meant he spent a lot of time at my apartment eating my food, using my streaming accounts, and gradually making himself more and more at home. "Hey, babe," he said without looking up from his game. "Can you order dinner? I'm starving." I was exhausted, running on 4 hours of sleep and 2 espressos, but I smiled and pulled out my phone. "Sure, Thai, okay?" "Whatever. Oh, and my mom is coming to visit next week. She'll probably stay here for a few days." I paused. "Here, Brandon, we've talked about this. I have a big presentation coming up and I need my space to prepare." He finally looked at me, his expression hardening slightly. "It's just a few days, Aria. What my family isn't good enough for you. My mom always says you think you're too good for us." There it was, the guilt trip, the subtle accusation that I was being unreasonable for wanting boundaries in my own home. I should have stood my ground. Instead, I caved. "Of course not. She's welcome to visit." Brandon smiled and went back to his game. "That's my girl. You know you're really lucky to have someone like me who doesn't care about all your career obsession. Most guys wouldn't put up with a girlfriend who works all the time." Lucky. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor by being with me. Another red flag I completely missed. The next few weeks were a blur of work and an increasingly uncomfortable living situation. Brandon's mother, Eleanor, arrived with enough luggage for a month-long stay, not a few days. She was a woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed, but with a hardness in her eyes that made me instantly uncomfortable. She had a way of looking at my apartment, at my things, with an appraising gaze that felt invasive. "Such a lovely place, Aria," she said on her first evening, running her hand along my marble kitchen counter. "Brandon told me you got a promotion. You must be making quite a bit of money." "I do well," I said carefully, not wanting to discuss my finances. "Brandon mentioned you're under a lot of stress. Maybe you should consider a less demanding career. A woman needs balance, especially if she wants to have a family someday." I bit my tongue. "I enjoy my work, Eleanor." "Of course, dear. I'm just saying there are more important things in life than money and status. Family, for instance." During Eleanor's visit, my cousin Tiffany started showing up more frequently. Tiffany was 25, perpetually between jobs, and had a talent for making everything about herself. We had never been particularly close growing up, but suddenly she was at my apartment every other day, usually with some crisis that required my help or, more often, my money. "Aria, I'm so sorry to ask, but I'm between paycheck and my car payment is due," she would say, her eyes welling up with practiced tears. I'll pay you back as soon as I get paid. She never paid me back. Not once. But every time I hesitated, Brandon would give me that look, the one that said I was being selfish and cold-hearted. The turning point came about 2 weeks into Eleanor's few days visit. I was working late at the office on a Friday night, trying to finish a preliminary analysis for what would become Project Zenith, when Tiffany called me hysterical. "Aria, you have to come home right now. It's an emergency." My heart dropped. What happened? Is someone hurt? "Just come home, please." I raced home, my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. When I burst through the door, I found Tiffany sitting on my couch perfectly fine, surrounded by shopping bags from expensive stores. "What's the emergency?" I demanded, my fear turning to anger. "Oh my God, Aria, you won't believe what happened. I found the most amazing sale at Nordstrom, but my credit card got declined, and I knew you'd want to see these clothes I got for you. You called me saying there was an emergency because you went shopping." Brandon emerged from my bedroom looking annoyed. "Why are you yelling at her? She was trying to do something nice for you." "Brandon, she made it sound like someone was dying." "God, Aria, you're so dramatic. This is exactly why my mom thinks you need therapy. You're always so wound up, so stressed. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with work, you'd be able to relax and appreciate when people try to do nice things for you." That was the moment I should have kicked them all out. But instead, I apologized. I actually apologized for being upset that my cousin had lied about an emergency to get me to come home to see her shopping haul that I apparently paid for with the credit card she somehow had access to. After that night, things escalated quickly. I noticed charges on my credit card I didn't make. When I confronted Tiffany, she claimed Brandon had given her permission to use my card for household expenses. Brandon backed her up, saying I was being stingy and that couples share everything. Eleanor chimed in that I was being very American and individualistic about money, and that in a real family, people supported each other. I was drowning in my own home, but I was too proud to admit it to anyone. I threw myself into my work, spending longer and longer hours at the office to avoid the toxic atmosphere in my apartment. That's when Victoria Sterling started her campaign to undermine me. It started subtly. Emails I sent would go unanswered. Meetings I organized would be rescheduled without my input. Ideas I presented in team discussions would be attributed to other people. And then came Project Zenith. Project Zenith was a massive contract with a prestigious investment fund that wanted to completely overhaul their risk assessment protocols. It was exactly the kind of high-profile, complex project that I excelled at. I had done the preliminary research, created the initial proposal framework, and built relationships with the key decision-makers at the client company. So when Victoria announced in a Monday morning meeting that she was assigning the project to Marcus Chin, a colleague with half my experience, I felt like I had been punched in the gut. "Victoria, I've been developing this proposal for 3 months, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've already established rapport with their CEO. Exactly, Aria. You've done excellent groundwork. Now it's time to let someone else take it across the finish line. You've been under a lot of stress lately. Some of your team members have expressed concerns about your emotional stability." My emotional stability. I felt my face flush with anger and humiliation as my colleagues avoided my gaze. "Who expressed concerns?" I demanded. "That's confidential, but I have a responsibility to ensure the well-being of all my team members. You've been working unsustainable hours, you look exhausted, and frankly, your performance in our last client meeting was erratic." It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But in that moment, sitting in that conference room with everyone staring at me, I felt small and powerless. After the meeting, I retreated to my office and did what I did best. I analyzed the situation. The data didn't lie. Victoria had been systematically excluding me from high-profile projects for the past month. She had been documenting every minor issue, every delay, every imperfect email response. She was building a case against me. But why? I had just brought in the Harrington account. I was one of the top performers in the company. That evening, I came home determined to at least reclaim my personal life. I had decided to ask Brandon, Eleanor, and Tiffany to leave. It was time to establish some boundaries to take back control of my space. I opened the door to chaos. Music was blasting from my expensive speaker system. There were at least 15 people in my apartment, people I had never seen before, drinking and laughing. My living room looked like a hurricane had hit it. And there, in the center of it all, were Brandon and Tiffany acting like gracious hosts at a party in my home, without my permission, without even telling me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was seeing Eleanor Vance emerging from my bedroom wearing my silk bathrobe, the one my mother had given me before she died. She held up her phone, clearly recording me, as I stood in the doorway, stunned. "Welcome home, Aria," Eleanor said, her voice carrying over the music. "Or should I say goodbye?" She walked over to my coffee table and tossed down a stack of papers. I recognized them immediately. A lease agreement. But when I picked it up, my hands started shaking. It had my signature on it. My electronic signature. But I had never signed this document. This lease listed Brandon Vance and Tiffany Hale as the primary tenants of my apartment. My name wasn't on it at all. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice barely audible over the music. Brandon sauntered over, a beer in his hand, looking pleased with himself. "It's the new lease, babe. You've been so stressed with work, Tiffany and I decided to help you out. We're taking over the apartment. You clearly can't handle the responsibility." "This is fraud," I said, my voice rising. "This is identity theft. You forged my signature." Tiffany laughed, actually laughed. "Forged, Aria? You're being paranoid. You signed the documents last week. Don't you remember? You were so tired you probably forgot." "I never signed anything." Eleanor moved closer, still recording. "See, everyone? This is what I was telling you about. Aria's been having these episodes. The stress from her job, the pressure. She's been forgetting things, getting confused. We're just trying to help her." I looked around at the strangers in my home, all of them watching me like I was some kind of spectacle, and I realized this was planned. This entire scene was orchestrated. The party, the video, the fake concern about my mental health. They were creating a narrative, building evidence that I was unstable, that I needed help, that they were the good guys trying to rescue me from myself. "Get out!" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "All of you get out of my apartment right now!" Brandon stepped forward, his expression hardening. "It's not your apartment anymore, Aria. Read the lease. We're the tenants now. You need to leave." "I own this apartment. I pay the mortgage." "Actually," Eleanor said, her smile widening, "we checked the building records. You're just a renter, dear. And according to this very legal, very binding lease agreement with your signature on it, you've transferred your tenancy rights to Brandon and Tiffany. The building management has already been notified." I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. My mind was racing, trying to understand how this was possible. Then I remembered. 3 months ago, I had signed a document digitally at work, a routine update to some insurance forms. My electronic signature had been captured, stored. Someone had access to it, and they had used it to steal my home. "You're going to jail for this," I said, grabbing my phone. "All of you. This is fraud, identity theft, and I'm calling the police right now." "Go ahead," Eleanor said calmly. "Call them. Show them the lease with your signature. Show them the video I just recorded of you having a breakdown, threatening us, accusing us of crimes when all we're trying to do is help. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic." I looked at Brandon. The man I had trusted, had cared for, had led into my life and my home. "How could you do this?" He shrugged, not even having the decency to look ashamed. "You made it easy, Aria. You were never home, always working, always putting your career first. You barely even noticed us living here rent-free for the past 3 months. Face it, you're too focused on being some corporate superwoman to actually live a real life. We're doing you a favor." Tiffany held up something that made my blood run cold. My credit card. One of my credit cards. "Thanks for the credit limit increase, by the way. I've been having so much fun shopping." Something inside me snapped. Not into pieces, but into perfect cold clarity. I looked at each of them, these people who had manipulated me, stolen from me, betrayed me, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. "You're right," I said quietly. "I have been too focused on work. I've been too trusting, too accommodating, too naive. But that changes right now." I walked past them, went to my bedroom, grabbed my laptop and work bag, and walked back out. On my way to the door, I stopped and looked directly at Eleanor's phone camera. "Keep that video. You're going to need it for your defense attorney." Then I left. I walked out of my own apartment, got in my car, and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove through the cold December night, my mind spinning. I ended up at a rundown motel on the outskirts of Boston, the kind of place where they don't ask questions if you pay cash. I sat in that dingy room, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and I did what I had trained to do for years. I analyzed the situation. Brandon, Tiffany, and Eleanor had committed multiple felonies: forgery of electronic signatures, identity theft, credit card fraud, illegal eviction, but they were betting I wouldn't fight back. They were counting on me being too embarrassed, too proud, too overwhelmed to pursue legal action. They thought I would just accept this move on lick my wounds in private. They were wrong. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Every financial transaction, every text message, every suspicious charge. I pulled up my credit reports and found something that made my rage crystallize into pure, focused determination. Tiffany hadn't just used my existing credit cards. She had opened 3 new accounts in my name. My credit score had dropped 60 points in 2 months. At 3 in the morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Miss Aria Thorne. The voice was deep-cultured with a hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. Who is this? My name is Silas Blackwood. You don't know me, but I've been looking for you for a very long time. You left something very important behind tonight. I don't know what you're talking about. Your dignity, your future, your birthright. I'm downstairs. Please come to the parking lot. We need to talk. I should have hung up. I should have called the police. Instead, I found myself walking out to the parking lot where a black helicopter sat rotors slowly spinning. A man in his 70s, tall and imposing despite his age, stood beside it. He was dressed in an expensive suit, and even in the darkness, I could see the family resemblance immediately. He looked like my mother. "Hello, Aria," Silas Blackwood said. "I'm your grandfather." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mother had told me her parents were dead. She had told me we had no family, that it was just the two of us against the world. She died when I was 19, and I had been alone ever since. "That's impossible," I finally said. Silas pulled out a photograph from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. It was old-faded but unmistakable. My mother, young and smiling, standing next to a younger version of the man in front of me. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, Dad and me before everything fell apart. "Your mother and I had a falling out," Silas said. "She married a man I didn't approve of, your father. I was wrong to turn my back on her. By the time I realized my mistake, she had disappeared, changed her name, cut off all contact. I've had investigators looking for her for 20 years. I found out about her death 2 years ago. I've been searching for you ever since." "Why now?" I asked, still trying to process this impossible situation. "Because I've been watching you, Aria. I've seen what you've accomplished, the brilliant career you've built, and I've seen what's happening to you, what they did to you tonight. And I'm here to tell you that it stops now. Get in the helicopter. We have work to do." I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded proof verification time to think. But standing in that parking lot with nothing but the clothes on my back and a laptop full of evidence, I made a choice. I got in the helicopter. During the flight back to Boston, Silas explained everything. He was the founder and CEO of Blackwood Global, one of the largest private equity firms in the world. My mother was his only child. When she married my father, a blue-collar worker from South Boston, Silas had threatened to disown her. She had called his bluff and walked away. By the time he came to his senses, she had vanished. "I was a proud fool," Silas said, his voice heavy with regret. "I valued status and pedigree over love. I lost my daughter because of it. I won't make the same mistake with you." "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want to give you what's rightfully yours, your inheritance, your family name, and more immediately, I want to help you destroy the people who tried to destroy you." He handed me a tablet. On it was a comprehensive dossier on Brandon Vance, Tiffany Hale, and Eleanor Vance. But there was more, much more. There were bank records showing substantial deposits into Brandon's account from an unexpected source, Victoria Sterling. "Your boss paid your ex-boyfriend to orchestrate your eviction," Silas said. "She wanted you out of the company, but she needed cause, a mental breakdown, a crisis at home that would make you seem unstable, unreliable. Brandon was more than happy to take her money. He's been planning this for months." I stared at the evidence in front of me. Victoria's involvement made terrible sense. She had been undermining me at work while Brandon was undermining me at home. A coordinated attack designed to make me question my own sanity, to make everyone around me see me as someone who was falling apart. "What do you want me to do?" I asked Silas. "I don't want you to do anything," he said. "I want to show you what you're capable of. You're a risk analyst, Arya. So analyze this situation. What are their vulnerabilities? What are their pressure points? How do we dismantle them completely legally and permanently?" For the first time in hours, I felt a smile cross my face. Not a happy smile, a predator's smile. Because this was what I did for a living. I found vulnerabilities. I assessed risks. I built strategies to protect assets and neutralize threats. And right now, I was the asset, and they were the threats. "We start with documentation," I said, my mind already racing through the steps. "Everything they've done is criminal, but we need ironclad proof. We need their communications, their financial records, evidence of premeditation." "Already done," Silas said, pulling up another screen. "While you were working tonight, my investigators were collecting evidence. We have access to their text messages, emails, and phone records, all obtained legally through proper channels, I assure you." I scrolled through the messages, my anger growing with each conversation. Brandon bragging to his friends about his genius plan. Tiffany discussing which of my belongings she wanted to keep. Eleanor coordinating with Victoria, providing updates on my deteriorating mental state which they were fabricating. But it was Victoria's messages that were the most damning. She had promised Brandon $50,000 once I was removed from the company. She had given him advice on how to forge my signature using a document scanning program. She had even suggested the apartment takeover scheme. "This is conspiracy," I said. "Multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, embezzlement. We can bury them." "We will," Silas said. "But not hastily. We're going to do this methodically, strategically. We're going to take apart their lives piece by piece, the same way they tried to take apart yours. And we're going to do it so completely that they'll never be able to hurt anyone else again." The helicopter landed on the roof of a building in downtown Boston, Blackwood Global Headquarters. Silas led me to his office, a massive space with panoramic views of the city. Waiting for us were 3 people, 2 lawyers from one of the most prestigious firms in Boston, and a cybersecurity expert who specialized in digital forensics. We worked through the night. By dawn, we had a comprehensive legal strategy. First, we would secure an emergency restraining order requiring Brandon, Tiffany, and Eleanor to vacate my apartment immediately and not destroy any evidence. Second, we would freeze all the credit accounts Tiffany had opened in my name and file fraud reports with the credit bureaus. Third, we would file a preservation order requiring them to maintain all electronic communications and devices. Fourth, we would notify Aegis Global's legal department of Victoria's involvement in criminal conspiracy. But Silas had one more suggestion. "Before we serve these papers, I want you to do something." "What?" "Go to work. Act completely normal. Don't give Victoria any indication that you know. I need you to win Project Zenith legitimately." "Can you do that?" I thought about Victoria's smug face when she had taken the project away from me. I thought about how she had worked with Brandon to destroy my credibility. And I nodded. "I can do better than that. I'm going to create a proposal so brilliant that the board won't be able to give it to anyone else." The next morning, I walked into Aegis Global like nothing had happened. I was wearing a new suit courtesy of Silas's credit card, and I had my game face on. Victoria was in the break room when I arrived, and her surprise at seeing me was evident. "Arya, I didn't expect you in today. I heard you had some personal issues." "Nothing I couldn't handle," I said smoothly. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Project Zenith. I've been thinking about the approach, and I have some ideas that might help Marcus." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's kind of you, but Marcus has it under control." "I'm sure he does. But I know you want the best possible outcome for the company, so I put together a few preliminary notes. Would you mind if I shared them with the team?" I could see her calculating, trying to figure out if this was a trap. But her arrogance won out. She probably thought I was trying to ingratiate myself back into her good graces. "Of course. We have a team meeting tomorrow morning. You can present then." That night, I worked on what would become Project Perimeter. Not just a risk assessment strategy, but a revolutionary approach to data security and fraud prevention. I incorporated everything I had learned from my own recent experience with identity theft and digital fraud. I designed a system that could detect unusual patterns in electronic signatures, flag suspicious financial transactions, and create an immutable audit trail for all sensitive documents. It was brilliant. It was exactly what the client needed, and it was mine. The next morning's presentation was the performance of my life. I walked into that conference room with confidence I had never felt before. Maybe it was knowing that Silas was in my corner. Maybe it was knowing that I had nothing left to lose. Maybe it was just rage channeled into pure focused competence. Project Zenith, as currently proposed, addresses the client's immediate concerns about risk assessment, I began. But it doesn't solve their underlying problem. They've had 3 major breaches in the past 2 years. The issue isn't their risk assessment, it's their security architecture and their inability to detect internal fraud. I pulled up my presentation. What I'm proposing is Project Perimeter, a comprehensive system that doesn't just assess risk, it creates an intelligent barrier that adapts in real time. Using machine learning algorithms, we can identify anomalies in behavior patterns, flag potential security threats before they become breaches, and create a transparent audit system that makes internal fraud virtually impossible. The room was silent. Even Victoria looked impressed, which clearly irritated her. Marcus Chin, the colleague who had been given my project, raised his hand. This is interesting, Aria, but it's beyond the scope of what the client asked for. It's exactly what they need, though, I countered. And according to my preliminary analysis, implementing this system would reduce their breach risk by 87% and could save them approximately $15 million annually in fraud prevention costs. That's a 20% increase in ROI over the original proposal. One of the senior partners, James Rodriguez, leaned forward. Do you have supporting data for these numbers? I smiled. I have a full analysis ready to share. I took the liberty of running simulations based on their last 3 years of security incidents. I distributed the report I had spent all night perfecting. As they read through it, I watched their expressions change from skepticism to interest to excitement. This wasn't just good, this was groundbreaking. Aria. Victoria said, her voice tight. This is impressive work, but you developed this overnight. The client presentation is in 3 days. We don't have time to pivot to an entirely new approach. With respect, Victoria, this isn't a pivot. It's an evolution, and I'm confident I can have a full presentation ready by then, if the team is willing to work with me. James looked at Victoria, then at me. I think we should pursue this. Victoria, can you work with Aria on integrating this into the existing proposal? I could see Victoria's jaw clench. Of course. Over the next 3 days, I worked around the clock on Project Perimeter. Victoria tried to sabotage me at every turn, questioning my data, undermining my credibility in meetings, but I had something she didn't. I had actual brilliance born from personal experience. I knew how fraud worked because I had just been victimized by it. Every security measure I proposed, every detection algorithm I designed came from a deep understanding of how predators operated. During those 3 days, Silas's legal team was also working. On the morning of the client presentation, just as I was getting ready to leave for the office, my phone rang. We've executed Phase 1, Silas's lawyer told me. Brandon, Tiffany, and Eleanor were served with the emergency restraining order an hour ago. They have until 5 p.m. today to vacate the premises. The preservation order has also been executed. They're not allowed to delete or destroy any evidence. Thank you, I said, feeling a weight lift from my chest. There's more. The forensic accountant found evidence that Tiffany opened 5 credit accounts in your name, not 3. Total fraudulent charges exceed $47,000. We've also identified the software Brandon used to forge your signature. It's sophisticated enough that it would have been difficult to detect, but our expert can prove it wasn't you. And Victoria, we're waiting until after your presentation. If we notify Aegis Global now, it might interfere with your work. But the moment you're done, we're delivering our evidence package to their legal department and the district attorney's office. The client presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the client's headquarters downtown. I arrived early, set up my materials, and waited. Victoria showed up 15 minutes late, looking flustered and angry. She had dark circles under her eyes. I wondered if someone had told her that her pawns had just been served with legal papers. The client's executive team filed in. 7 people, including their CEO, a woman named Margaret Chin, who had built her investment fund from nothing and had a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. Victoria started the presentation going through the standard Project Zenith proposal. It was competent, professional, exactly what they had asked for. When she finished, Margaret nodded politely. "Thank you, Victoria, that's very thorough." Then it was my turn. I stood up, connected my laptop, and began. "Ms. Chin, your team has experienced 3 major security breaches in the past 2 years. You've lost money, you've lost trust, and you've lost competitive advantage. Project Zenith will help you assess and manage risks, but I'm here to tell you that risk assessment isn't enough. You need Project Perimeter." For the next 45 minutes, I presented a system that would revolutionize their security infrastructure. I showed them exactly how their last breach had occurred, the exact vulnerabilities that had been exploited, and how my system would have detected and prevented it. I demonstrated the machine learning algorithms in real time, showed them the cost-benefit analysis, and provided case studies from similar companies that had implemented comparable systems. When I finished, the room was completely silent. Then Margaret started clapping. Slowly at first, then more enthusiastically. Her entire team joined in. "Ms. Thorne," Margaret said, "this is exactly what we need. I don't want Project Zenith. I want Project Perimeter. How soon can you start?" Victoria's face had gone pale. "Margaret, this is wonderful, but we need to discuss pricing and implementation timelines. Aria has presented an excellent concept, but—" "Ms. Sterling," Margaret interrupted. "I'm not interested in concepts. I'm interested in results. And Ms. Thorne has just shown me results. I want her leading this project. Is that going to be a problem?" Victoria forced a smile. "Of course not. Aria is one of our top analysts." "Then it's settled. Ms. Thorne, I'll have my legal team contact you directly to discuss the contract terms. I look forward to working with you." As we packed up to leave, my phone buzzed. A text from Silas. "Evidence package has been delivered to Aegis Global and the DA. Beautifully done, granddaughter." Victoria and I rode back to the office in tense silence. I knew the axe was about to fall, but I wanted to be there to see it. When we walked into Aegis Global, the receptionist's eyes widened as she saw us. "Ms. Sterling, Mr. Rodriguez wants to see you in his office immediately." Victoria's face went white. She looked at me, and in that moment, I saw her realize that I knew. I smiled. Not a friendly smile, a victorious smile. "I think you should go, Victoria. Don't keep James waiting." I went to my office and started working on the Project Perimeter implementation plan. About an hour later, I heard raised voices from the executive floor, then silence. 20 minutes after that, James Rodriguez came to my office. "Aria, do you have a moment?" "Of course." He sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. We've just been made aware of some very serious allegations against Victoria Sterling. Allegations that involve you." "I'm aware," I said calmly. "You are? Why didn't you come to us?" "Because I needed to handle Project Perimeter first, and because I wanted to make sure I had irrefutable evidence before I made accusations against a senior executive." James nodded slowly. "The evidence your legal team provided is damning. Victoria has been suspended pending a full investigation. The board has asked me to inform you that we are taking this matter extremely seriously. We are also deeply embarrassed and apologetic that this happened under our watch." "I appreciate that, James." "There's more. Given Victoria's suspension and your outstanding work on Project Perimeter, the board would like to offer you the position of Senior Director of Risk Innovation. You would report directly to the board, and you would have full authority over Project Perimeter and any future initiatives in this space." I had been angry for so long, so focused on revenge, that I had almost forgotten what victory felt like. But sitting in that moment, hearing James offer me everything Victoria had tried to steal from me, I felt it. Pure, undiluted satisfaction. "I accept," I said. "Excellent. There's one more thing. The board wants to make sure you're receiving appropriate support. We understand you've had some personal challenges recently." "Those challenges have been resolved," I said firmly. "I'm exactly where I need to be." That evening, I went back to my apartment for the first time since that terrible night. The locks had been changed by the building management, and I had the new keys. When I opened the door, I found my apartment exactly as I had left it. Brandon, Tiffany, and Eleanor had been forced to remove all their belongings and leave mine untouched. Well, almost untouched. Someone had tried to clean up the mess from the party, but they had done a poor job. I would need to hire professional cleaners, but for now, I just stood in my living room breathing in the silence, feeling the weight of reclaimed territory. My phone rang. Silas. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I just survived a war." "You did, but you didn't just survive Aria, you won. Completely and decisively. What happens now to them I mean?" Brandon, Tiffany, and Eleanor are facing multiple felony charges. The district attorney is very interested in making an example of this case. Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, extortion. They're looking at significant prison time if convicted. And Victoria, Aegis Global has fired her for cause. She's also facing charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and bribery. Her legal career is effectively over, and since you were a victim of her criminal conduct, you have grounds for a substantial civil lawsuit as well. "I don't want money from her," I said. "I just want to make sure she can never do this to anyone else." "That's already guaranteed. The Massachusetts Bar Association has been notified. She'll be disbarred." I felt a sense of closure settling over me. "Thank you, Silas, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have," he said. "You're brilliant, Aria. You always were. I just gave you the resources to fight back on equal footing. The strategy, the intelligence, the determination, that was all you." "So what happens now with us, I mean? You said I'm your heir." "That's up to you. I would like you to be part of the Blackwood family to take your rightful place in the company. But I learned my lesson with your mother. I won't force you into anything. Take your time. Build your career. When you're ready, if you're ready, the door is open." A month later, Brandon and Tiffany accepted plea bargains rather than go to trial. Brandon was sentenced to 3 years in prison for identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Tiffany got 18 months for her role in the credit card fraud. Eleanor, who had been the mastermind behind much of the scheme, refused to plea and went to trial. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 5 years. Victoria Sterling fought her charges for months, but eventually the evidence was overwhelming. She was convicted of conspiracy, bribery, and abuse of her corporate position. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and fined $500,000. The day of Victoria's sentencing, I was required to appear in court to give a victim impact statement. I stood in front of the judge and said everything I had wanted to say to Victoria for months. Victoria Sterling didn't just try to take my job. She tried to take my sanity, my credibility, my reputation, and my future. She conspired with criminals to make me look unstable so she could steal my work. But she made one critical mistake. She assumed I was weak. She assumed I would break. And when I didn't break, her entire scheme collapsed. I don't forgive her. I don't feel sorry for her. But I do thank her because she taught me that being kind doesn't mean being weak, and having boundaries doesn't make you cold. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up for yourself even when the whole world seems to be against you. On the day Brandon was scheduled to read his public confession at the mandatory apartment building meeting, I made sure to be there. It was the one condition of his plea bargain that I had insisted on. He had to publicly admit what he had done in front of all the neighbors who had witnessed my humiliation. Brandon stood in front of the assembled residents, his hands shaking as he read from a prepared statement. "I, Brandon Vance, stole from Aria Thorne, forged her signature, and conspired to evict her from her own home. I placed hidden cameras to record her private moments. I took advantage of her trust and her kindness. I did this for money and because I was greedy and entitled. I am sorry." The words meant nothing. His apology meant nothing. But watching him stand there humiliated and powerless, seeing the disgust on the faces of people who had once watched him victimize me, that meant everything. Tiffany gave a similar confession, her voice barely a whisper, as she admitted to opening credit accounts in my name and stealing $47,000. She couldn't even look at me. Eleanor wasn't there. She had refused to participate, which was fine. Her 5-year sentence spoke louder than any confession could. 6 months after everything fell apart, I stood in my penthouse apartment looking out over Boston. Project Perimeter had been implemented successfully, and Margaret Chen's investment fund had already seen a significant reduction in security incidents. Other companies were reaching out wanting to implement similar systems. I was being called the Perimeter Queen in industry publications. Silas had officially welcomed me into the Blackwood family, though I kept my mother's last name, Thorne. It felt right, honoring the woman who had raised me alone, who had been strong enough to walk away from wealth and privilege because her father couldn't accept the man she loved. I understood her better now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. I had learned so much in those brutal months. I learned that toxic people count on your silence, your embarrassment, your unwillingness to make waves. They count on you being too proud to admit you've been victimized. But the moment you refuse to be silent, the moment you stand up and say, "This is not okay," they lose their power. I learned that kindness is not weakness, but kindness without boundaries is self-destruction. You can be a good person and still protect yourself. You can be forgiving without being a doormat. I learned that sometimes family isn't the people you're born to, but the people who stand with you when everything falls apart. Silas could have stayed away. He could have let me handle my mess alone, but he chose to show up to fight for me, to give me the tools I needed to fight for myself. Most importantly, I learned that revenge isn't about anger. It's about justice. It's about making sure that the people who hurt you can't hurt anyone else. It's about taking back your power and using it to build something better. Standing in my apartment that evening, sipping coffee and looking at the city lights, I felt at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had proven to myself that I could survive the worst betrayal and come out stronger. I had built a life on my own terms, not on someone else's conditions. My phone buzzed with a text from Silas. "Dinner tomorrow. There's someone I'd like you to meet, a potential business partner who's very impressed with Project Perimeter." I smiled and texted back, "I'll be there." This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a life where I set the boundaries, where I decided who deserved my time and trust, where I built something that couldn't be taken away. Brandon had said I was too focused on my career to live a real life. He was wrong. I wasn't too focused on my career. I was focused on building a life worth living, and that life didn't have room for people who saw my success as something to steal my kindness, as something to exploit, or my trust as something to abuse. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. If you're in a toxic situation right now, if people are taking advantage of your kindness, if you feel like you're drowning in someone else's chaos, know this. You are not weak for being kind. You are not stupid for trusting. You are not crazy for feeling hurt. But you do have a choice. You can stay or you can fight back. Fighting back doesn't mean being cruel. It means being strategic. It means documenting everything. It means understanding that sometimes the system works if you know how to use it. It means finding your people, the ones who will stand with you when things get ugly. It means believing in yourself enough to bet on your own future. So here's my question for you. If someone tried to take everything from you tomorrow, would you have the receipts? Would you have the support system? Would you have the courage to stand up and say, "Enough"? And if not, what are you going to do today to prepare yourselves? Drop a comment and let me know if you've ever had to deal with toxic people trying to sabotage your success. How did you handle it? What would you do differently? I want to hear your stories. And if this resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear this, hit that like button and subscribe. Because there are too many Brandons, Tiffany's, Eleanors, and Victorias in this world, and the only way we stop them is by refusing to be silent, by standing up for ourselves, and by showing others that they can do the same. Your move.